So I'll just start to say, first of all, thank you for everyone for joining our masterclass today. We hope today that you're going to be able to get an understanding of hiring for potential. But what I'm sure has been of interest for most of you to join today is to get access to Jon, and for Jon to talk through his experience of working with Arctic Shores on how they switched to hiring for potential. I will kick off with some introductions. First of all, to say hello everyone. If I've not met you before, my name's Jacqueline Healy. I'm Managing Business Psychologist at Arctic Shores. I've spent most of my career, far too long to remember, but over 15 years in the world of assessment for selection. Looking at various different ways to recruit great talent into businesses. So very excited to be talking to you all today about the hiring for potential and how we do that at Arctic Shores. I'll just hand over to our two other panelists today. Joel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Jack. So I'm one of the business psychologists at Arctic Shores, and I was the consultant that worked with Jon and his team at Siemens to actually implement hiring for potential for one of their roles. So I'm joining to share my experience and some of the kind of steps that we went through and some of the results that we got from that pilot kickoff. So that's kind of my part in this. Jon?
Yeah, thanks, Joel and Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. From one of my sites where I'm based today up in the northeast. Also have a site in Manchester and a site over in Dublin. So I am the MD of the Siemens electrification and automation business. What is that? Basically, we are a large provider of both product, systems, solutions, services, and now IoT and all things digital to enable the grid in the UK to connect exciting renewable solutions. So without our boring grey boxes, which is I like to say, you can't do that exciting stuff like EV charging and solar farms, for example. Why am I here? Exactly as Jack says, I'm going to be able to share some of my experiences to date, good and more challenging. And why I'm with Arctic Shores, or why I'm joining Arctic Shores, is in my business, we like to innovate. We like to do things differently, because if you do the same things, you get the same results. So some people say it's a bit crazy, a bit brave, but I think if you've got a good team around you, both from a partner perspective on your own team, you can make a success. And that's exactly what we've experienced in the first pilot with Arctic Shores. Arctic Shores aren't new to Siemens. The guys have done a lot of work with us on our entry-level talent, and my pilot has been around extending that into more professional roles. And the next phase of the pilot is going into a management layer as well. So hopefully today we can explore the reach of Arctic Shores in your organisation.
Thank you, Jon. Thank you, Joel. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So just to go through the agenda today, we've got until 3:30. There is a fair bit to get through, and we're really conscious we want to leave a good chunk of that time at the end for Q&A. So we're going to take you through the objectives that we'd like to achieve today, the what and the why around hiring for potential, a really big chunk of time on the Siemens case study, where we'll really go into detail around what was done and the results, and you'll get the opportunity to ask Jon any questions around that, or Joel on the how. Then we'll look at some practical steps. So at Arctic Shores, you would have seen we've produced our hiring for potential playbook, and we're just going to talk through some of those practical steps that, if from what you hear today has excited you and you're ready to jump in for hiring for potential, some ways you can get moving on that. And as I said at the end, a nice chunk of time left for a Q&A. As we go through, there will be some times when we're asking for your input. So a few polls. So anyone used to Zoom, you should see down the bottom, there is an icon that says poll. And if you click on that, you should be able to see this question, which is, what is your primary reason for joining the masterclass today? If you don't mind just selecting one of those answers, that's going to be really helpful for us to look at after this class, but also we can get to these discussion points in the Q&A section as well. Also, you'll see there is a chat and a Q&A function on your Zoom screen. So if at any point you do have a comment or a question that you want to just get in there before we get to that Q&A stage at the end, please feel free to add it. It might be something we wait until the end till we answer, but I know if anything like me, I think of a question, if I don't write it down, I would have forgotten it by the end. So feel free to add those in. Okay, so when you're ready, if you could just complete the first poll indicating your reason for joining today. Perfect. I can't see that if that's all been completed or not. So I'm assuming that that's coming through, and that's something that we can have a look at after the masterclass today. But if you have completed that, thank you for your participation. I promise you that that's as much as the participation's going to be. There's going to be no forcing of making anyone share any concerns or stories today. So it is all just going to be a nice easy click of the button and then questions if you're looking for that. The results have just popped up. Brilliant. So we can see that probably there's two reasons that are the most popular: looking to increase your knowledge on hiring for potential, and hearing how Siemens have done that. And then thirdly, getting that advice. Great. Those are all three things that are going to happen today. So that's good to know. Perfect. Okay, let's move on then to the objectives of what we're looking to achieve today. So first of all, understand the benefits of hiring for potential. As some of you just indicated in that poll, that's going to be helpful. Share the results Siemens have had through hiring for potential, and Jon and Jo are going to take you through that section, and that's going to be really useful because I'm sure the challenges that Jon's faced in his business area are going to be ones that you can all relate to. And then finally, as I said, those practical steps for you to be able to work with the Arctic Shores Handbook and implement that hiring for potential strategy. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about the what and the why now. What is hiring for potential, and why should you do it? So some of you may be aware, but there's been lots of research, a big piece of research done actually just before the pandemic, and then more recently, even this week, some latest research coming out from Goldman Sachs. But ultimately, it all points in a very similar direction. 85 million jobs are going to disappear, and that's mainly due to the new technologies. It's not all bad news. There will be a huge portion of new roles, 97 million new roles created. Digital first type roles will appear. What that does mean though is that 50% of the current workforce don't have the current skills needed, so there's going to be the element of reskilling that current workforce to fit the new roles that are going to be created. So it results in this mismatch of available experience and skills, and it's actually set to cost businesses up to 38 billion in lost growth revenue every year. So I think those figures alone are enough to make us see that there's a time for change. More recently this week, and you may have noticed in the news, Goldman Sachs have just produced a report, and they are also estimating 300 million jobs over the next decade will be automated due to the advancements in AI that is coming through very rapidly. So why do we need to consider doing something differently? Is for all of those reasons. We are going to have lots of candidates in the marketplace with lots of great skills and experience, but they might not be the same experience of the roles that are being created. So it's going to be this focus on this displacement of workers and how we're going to move them into the new roles. And the way that we can do that is to stop doing what we've always done and have this very focus on someone bringing experience to a role, and that means that they're going to go on and be able to do this similar role in a very perfect way because they've done it before for 10 years before. And it's that move to understand, actually, if I can develop people in this role, if they can bring in those skills and those abilities to be able to learn and grow in the role, then that's what we should be looking for, and stop that focus on someone having had that experience previously. And put that focus more on those skills for someone to be able to learn and develop in a new role. Next slide, please. So hiring for potential is really requiring organisations to break free from that experience-centric mindset. So expanding their talent pool and seeing more in people. And on the left-hand side here, you can see what is probably happening in many organisations today. It's that I guess that backward looking view, using CVs to really make that decision around how well someone would do a new job in a different organisation. And as Jon mentioned, if we carry on doing that same thing, we're not going to get different results when we're hiring. So this reliance on CVs is really pushing you to limit that talent pool. You're fishing in possibly the same market that you've fished in for a number of years, possibly that same market that your competitors are also trying to fish in. And by breaking away from looking at a CV and looking at previous experience, what you're really looking to do is diversify that talent pool, bring in a process that stops looking at that really subjective experience and places that focus on that objective behaviour that you're really looking for, that understanding of how you can really develop someone in the role, rather than just waiting for that perfect candidate to land in your recruitment process with all those years of experience. Also, when in the playbook, we talk about how the different steps of hiring for potential can not only give you a great pool of talent, can not only reduce that bias that might come into selection processes, but also increase that time to hire, not increase it, decrease time to hire, and reduce those costs that are coming through. Instead of having roles open for 100, 200 days because you're waiting for that perfect candidate to land, you're widening that talent pool, you're changing your opinion on what's the main priorities to look at, and therefore attracting a wider talent pool for you to make some quicker decisions on and get them into the business. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're just going to have a quick look at the how. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of details because actually I think this is brought to life better by Jon and Joel when they talk through how it's been implemented at Siemens. It's also, if you've seen the Arctic Shores playbook, each one of these stages is talked about in lots of detail, but just to quickly give an overview of this slide, these are the 6 steps that the playbook talks about in how you can really transform away from your focus on experience to hiring for potential. The first point to mention, number 1, changing your mindset. This is about going all in when you're talking about hiring for potential. If you are just saying, okay, I won't look at a candidate's CV, but actually when they come to interview stage, my hiring manager is really going to question them on what they've done for the past 10 years, then you're going to have that misalignment. So changing the mindset is not only perhaps if you are the talent acquisition, or you are, the hiring manager yourself and you're brought into hiring for potential, it's making sure that everyone that has that touch point in the process is also brought into that change in recruitment process. So changing the mindset to make sure that the role that you are hiring for potential is successful and everyone's brought into that. When we look at steps 2 and 3, that's about making sure that the message that you put out to candidates is also very clear, that you're looking to hire for potential. If you just know that, but then your job description and your job advert still reflects the years of experience that you're looking for, or you're very fixated on a particular qualification, then that's not going to have the impact that you're looking for. So stages 2 and 3 are really about redefining that success and making sure that that message is really clear to the candidates that you're going out to. Then you have the stages 4 and 5, which are really about making sure that once those candidates have come into your process, you're really measuring them on the things that are important. So really trying to take that step back from the fixation of what experience might bring, but also looking at what their transferable skills might bring, how you can look at those behaviours that are truly going to make them successful in the role. And then making sure that as you get through to that interview stage, again, you're asking the right types of questions. So it's that step away from, tell me about a time when you've done this in the past, and more about asking them how they would react and respond to likely situations that they would be part of once they are in the role. And then finally, respect the candidate, making sure that the candidate feels like the time they've invested in this process has been respected by you as an employer. That can be through giving feedbacks at certain stages of the process. Also making sure that each individual groups within the recruitment processes, so your minority groups, are also being treated as fairly as your majority groups as you go through. Okay, so that's an overview of the Hiring for Potential playbook. I'm going to hand over next to Joel and Jon, who are going to talk you through the Siemens experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that fantastic overview. I think it would be good to just give a little bit of a context about the project that we were doing together, Siemens and Arctic Shores. So what we were doing was actually a pilot or an experiment. So we did an A/B test. So we had 2 project engineers, and we put one through the Arctic Shores process in terms of hiring for potential and all the changes we've just talked about, and the other stayed the same, the normal Siemens classic process. So what this gave us the opportunity to do was, in a kind of really psychologically safe way, see the difference in terms of what we could actually impact in terms of results, and in terms of, you know, all those things that we've talked about, fishing for a wider talent pool, finding quality candidates not based on experience but based on the behaviours that matter. I think what would be really fantastic would be for Jon to give us a bit of an overview of where he was coming from and the motivation going into this, and why you were interested in trying this out. So if we go to the next slide, please. Oh, no, we're on the next slide. So Jon, if you could take it away in terms of that.
Of course I can, Joel. And I think probably I'll go back to my introduction, which is around, there is a thirst for innovation. We're an innovation business, and there's a thirst from myself and my leadership team and the people that are around us, around understanding that probably what we have now, given the changes that the industry is likely to face around more digitalization, around more competition, around more different ways of working, not using the standard way of doing things that we've always done, which has played really well for us in the past. Let's make no no bones around that. We've got some good talent in the business from it. We've got to do things and look at things a little bit differently. So, like any good MD, I didn't just jump straight into the Arctic Shores camp immediately. I did a little bit of work with my talent acquisition team. I'm fortunate in that we have an internal support service that recruit on our behalf, and naturally they have a strong link historically into Arctic Shores through the entry talent route. I asked them to put me in front of a few organisations, and regrettably, a good chunk of those were probably leaning again on that CV reliance rather than behavioural fit, behavioural analysis. What are the behaviours? What are you going to bring to the role in the future? And that really was, what really attracted me to continue to expand the relationship. I think, again, also, Joel, I think post-pandemic or maybe even through pandemic, that talent source through traditional routes has become really saturated, narrow, and also the whole process of getting someone through to offer, the amount of fallout at offer stage due to potentially attraction of salaries at higher rates elsewhere. So the wastage time in the process, has become quite alarming. In addition to that as well, Joel, is probably the lack of diversity in the candidates that we are getting, particularly when you are relying on that experience pool. And as we'll probably talk about in some of our results, this has naturally found us that diverse pool of individuals, not only in terms of gender and ethnicity, but also experience as well. So I think it was time to do something different, Joel. Or else we would just carry on wheel spinning through this hiring process.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I think as well, the handpicked team that you put together in terms of the hiring manager and the kind of the team of Avengers that you got together to work with us on this was really useful in terms of doing this properly. Can we go to the next slide, please, Megan? So just to kind of kick off, I suppose, the first big change that we made was in terms of redefining the job in terms of potential, and that feeds through into the advert and the job description. So what you can see here, and I don't mean to put Jon and Siemens on the spot.
I can't look at it, Joel, anymore. I can't look.
There's the original job advert that Siemens would have shared for the project engineer and did share for the B part of the experiment. And what you can see here is what I think is typical of most job adverts, which is a long list of tasks, and those tasks are very specific, and they use particular language that only someone who maybe has experience as a project engineer before would be able to even understand. The next part of this is the kind of list of qualifications and experience that someone actually needs to even be able to apply. Now, there's two problems with this. The first is that this is essentially being used to screen out people. So the advert is a way of getting rid of people from the off, which it's necessary in the classic process, but it's not what we want here. The other problem is there's no reference to the behaviours and success criteria that we actually want someone to bring to the role. So just because someone has the tasks and they've got the experience doing the tasks doesn't mean they're the right sort of person for the role. Next slide, please. So what we did was a process called job analysis. So we redefined the job for a series of workshops collaboratively to understand what behaviours and aptitudes were really actually needed for success in the role. And what this gave us the opportunity to do in terms of the advert was to actually talk about these success criteria at the heart of the advert. So we can do away with that long list of experience and qualifications and instead talk about the sort of person we're looking for. Alongside that, we also do lots of kind of little changes to basically change the ethos and the philosophy of the advert to make it more of an invitation. So as part of that, there's, being upfront about the salary. So there's quite a lot of recent research that talks about how impactful including the salary is in terms of job applications. So as much as 60 or 70% more applications, and that's especially so for women or people from an ethnic minority. And then, stating upfront that we don't want to see your CV. And all of these things together really, really kind of invite candidates to apply. If you've got anything to add in terms of the how on this, John.
I think what we're moving towards now is, as we go through the process, is that importance, as you say, of the virtual team, both from a Siemens perspective and from an Arctic Shores perspective. In that, all along the process, there are opportunities for people to drop out of the way that we do things. Including starting to maybe get the CV out when the candidates come in. So just a bit of a tip for anyone who is maybe going through this process or is tempted to after today, is get that sponsorship right from the top of the organization, first of all. And, even get into the hearts and minds before. So we were fortunate enough to have an event where a colleague from Arctic Shores came and presented to a mixed room of individuals, and there was a lot of arms folding going on, which was, how dare you tell me that my 30 years experience means nothing anymore? And it's not about that, because experience gets you to a point. Potential could take you in a different direction, irrelevant of whether you're an early talent or 30 years into your career. Who knows, that last phase of your career can be a complete diversion because your potential is steering you in that direction. So I think the creation of that job advertisement, as you can see, the start reality, Joel, that is a brave move, because that is very typically from the past non-Siemens like. So, and if the team wasn't aligned to that, there could be detractors that drop in. So that piece, that journey is it takes a little bit of effort to navigate, but boy, is it worth it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Next slide, please, Megan. So what you can see here is the outcome of the two adverts side by side. So what you see is a six-fold increase. So this is the same role posted at the same time in the same space of time, and you have 6 times the number of applications. So I think the value of doing this from an attraction piece is really evident, and I think it would be great to see how this plays out in future examples. And hopefully this isn't a freak, but I think given the sheer volume in terms of 533 applications for 2 roles is fantastic. I mean, anything to offer from your side, John? Is that
No, just that, I mean, if to maybe slightly challenge your view on the freakish nature, 83 is probably about right for a typical Siemens role of this nature. So if you're benchmarking, we aren't normally 20 and have suddenly gone 83, and there's an exponential lift, and it's just because the role's really attractive. That is what we'd expect for a typical hiring pool, under 100 for that role. So to be 6.2 times higher, it is absolutely incredible. And listen, that comes with some challenges in the talent team to pool and to sift through those applications initially. So be committed to understand that and the impact that can have on resourcing. But isn't that what we want? We want more attraction into the organization to be able to give us that nice challenge to have of being too busy.
Brilliant, thank you. So that's kind of the widening the funnel piece, the first half and the first aim of what we were doing. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we're not going to select in using a CV, then how are we going to select in? So this is the next phase of the project, the next half of the project. So that's all about finding ways of using real evidence-based methods to find the best candidates out of those 533. So the opportunity that having those 533 candidates gives is to put that behavior-based assessment first and foremost. And to really maximize the efficacy of the SIFT, we can actually, really crank up how high the scores are. So this has two practical uses. The first is you can actually sift massive volumes in an efficient way if you use this sort of automated tool. The second is that you can really pump up the quality of candidates that you actually want to spend time on. So those two things together, and it wouldn't be possible if you didn't have that massive volume of applications. So this combined with, we use written questions as a way of assessing, motivation, cultural fit, and those sorts of more, softer things, but still marked in an objective, consistent way. So these two things then feed through into the interview, or the potential interview, as I've called it here. Next slide, please. So just to give a flavour of what that interview looked like, so we designed a bespoke interview guide, bespoke to the project engineer role. And what this was based on is those same success criteria that we used in the advert. So all stemming from the job analysis that we did together. We can really, measure those success criteria every stage of the way for each part of the process. And really critically here, we've moved away from asking for past examples in honor of the fact that we're moving away from experience. So we're interested in doing this in a potential-based way. So the way that we've decided to do that here is through situational questions. So to ask someone how they would do something if they were in that given situation, and to just draw on their natural resources and not past experience and past examples. I think that's really critical here. And the good thing is that this can be tailored to the role and specific to the role, and augmented. I don't know how your kind of hiring managers found the experience with the interview guide or with that sort of advert, John. I don't know if they haven't had any feedback on that.
Yeah, probably back to my point before, Joel, around if your hiring managers are involved in this planning stage of the process, then they tend to stay on board with this, because the danger is that you, as I say, you subversely start to try and find out what that experience is, which kind of defeats the object. I think they found, I think from a recruit manager, they found this a really refreshing, natural way of getting into a good conversation with candidates, because if you've got a relaxed candidate, you're going to get the best out of them, aren't they? So there wasn't, again, certainly not criticizing how we've done things historically, but maybe that competency-based fixedness limits the depth of where you can go to with your conversations. I think from a candidate perspective, and we are fortunate enough to have a conversation with one of our hirees today, is the impression that it gave of Siemens was, I've got to get this job. I want to work with an organization that is this kind of relaxed conversation where they're really trying to understand my potential and what I can bring to the organization. So as a client experience, they found it a very positive experience, as well as all of the feedback they were getting through the process, be it the assessment, post-interview. So it leaves a really strong impression of the way that Siemens is as a place to work.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Great to hear the feedback from the candidates that went through the process as well. Can we go to the next slide, please, Megan? So this is just, a final kind of overview of the process and what it looks like from a top level perspective. So we've covered what that looks like, but I think the key point to stress here is just, it's quite a simple process, but it doesn't mean that you can't find really high quality candidates in the end. So that's kind of the main point to stress on this slide. Next slide, please. So you can see how that works from a kind of efficiency perspective. So here you can actually kind of get a sense of, with 305 candidates invited with a 92% completion rate for the assessment, which is excellent, and shows that kind of initial buy-in that we're getting from the candidates, that we can sift down to 62 candidates and spend time on the written questions for those 62 candidates before interviewing 8, following 2 fairly thorough sifts already. So we're only spending time on those highest quality candidates. Next slide, please.
Is it worth just mentioning that 80 boundary, Joel?
Yes.
Because I don't think that's typical, is it? I think it's normally around about the 60 mark.
Yeah, so exactly.
So we were forced artificially to lift that to candidates that you are, really top level, just to kind of give us an opportunity to shortlist. Because I know, having witnessed the recruiting managers leaving the room, they came out ruddy-cheeked and flustered in this kind of, please give me a bad candidate to interview. How the hell am I going to narrow this down to 2? Please give me another role, John, which I flatly refuse because we can't afford it. But that was the, that filtering, or that kind of the lifting just shows where we were going to. And we've actually now started to think about, of that untapped talent between 60 and 80, how do we keep those guys warm in case there are future opportunities? So it gives you that, with having 500 plus candidates, there's a real pool of talent there that have expressed an interest into a type of role within Siemens.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it really gives a good flavour of the dual advantage of attraction, of widening the funnel and managing to get so many candidates through the door, which then means that you can really up the quality of the candidates through the sift. So that works in tandem.
I'm sure your future partners, if they want to go up to 90, that is people have that obligation to do that. You want a good pool to be able to filter into, but it gives you that flexibility of what works for you as a business.
Brilliant. So just to kind of focus on the point about the efficiency of the process. I think, I don't know if this is right, John, but we were told that 80 is a kind of typical time to hire or time to offer for a Siemens advert. And, this is 41 days, which is from putting the advert out on the 10th of January through to the second week of February, offers were out. So, we can see how it works efficiently from that perspective as well.
And let's not play down the time of year as well, Joel. That's typically tough time of year to get people aligned in this process. So there may be some post-Christmas, during Christmas fat in that as well. Yeah. Quite literally post-Christmas, isn't it?
Post-Hanukkah.
Oh, sorry, of course, yeah.
Next slide, please. So just to kind of focus on that final, the quality of hire piece, and we've got some quotes here from some of your hiring managers, John. So I don't know if you want to take us through a little bit what they're feeding back to you through that.
I probably just repeated that. My apologies, but yeah, we could have picked any of them, and I think probably my just to give you some additional that isn't on the screen. I can probably say with high conviction that of the 8 that we shortlisted, 0 of those candidates would have been screened out. They would have been screened out the process, and we wouldn't have seen them, due to the fact that they didn't have the typical experiences that previous selection processes were looking for. We've got these are project engineers in the electrification space, and I've got candidates that have come from Talk and from Aldi supermarket. These are not typical sources of historical candidates, but initial impressions and initial feedback from them is that they are highly suited for this role. And and again, I'm sure my Arctic Shores friends won't mind me saying this. Look, it's all well and me good coming here evangelizing around the process, but this is A to G of a journey to Z. In 6 months' time, I'm absolutely high confidence that these people will be in the business and will be doing really well. But isn't there a risk with every attraction process? Question mark. There's always a gamble, but if you can narrow it further through behavioral fit, surely that gives you a better chance of success.
Brilliant. I think that's the Siemens bit done, Jack.
Thank you. Thanks both. It's really great to have that insightful overview and, more importantly, see those great results that you've achieved there at Siemens. So thank you for sharing that. Conscious of the time, and we do want to have a good chunk left for any questions that are coming through. So the next step is to just take you through some practical steps. If from what you've heard from Jon's experience there, you're thinking, yes, this is for me, I definitely want to achieve those great results in my business, we'll just talk about some great steps to help you get started. I think just before we do that, there may be another time for you to share some of your thoughts and opinions. So as we was going through there, Jon was talking through, they chose a role actually where they already had some alignment from the stakeholders in the business to really do something differently with recruitment. So that was one of those hurdles that had been overcome, but it would just be really interesting to hear from you all what you perceive to be your biggest barrier if you was going to implement hiring for potential in your organisation. Give everyone a minute or two to just choose one of those answers. And it may actually be a combination of a couple of those in reality. But if you just choose, first of all, your the barrier that you think would be the main reason that would stop you being able to implement hiring for potential. Okay, let's give it a minute. I'll learn from my mistake before that actually the results do pop up if I give it a moment.
Poll patience is a thing, yeah? I didn't realise.
I know. No, this one's taken a bit longer, so we'll see. Everyone's thinking about it. We have a comment. It only shows me the first poll. I got the second poll shown to me, so hopefully that's not an issue across the board, but please do add in if it is. I wonder, Megan, if we just move on the slide deck, just so we can keep to time. And then if those results pop up, we can pick them up in the Q&A. There we go. It comes up eventually. So, okay, I think some of you was able to access that second poll. So apologies for anyone that didn't quite work for you. So it looks like top answer there. No surprise, it's the stakeholders, it's the hiring managers, it's getting them to see the benefits on moving away from that previous experience, if that's what they've been used to recruited for before. So that might come up again in the Q&A section, but thank you for your participation. Okay, so here are some practical ways to making a change and getting started. And again, each of these stages are discussed in the hiring for potential playbook. I think the first point is one that you can't underestimate. Whilst Jon has seen excellent results on that one role, what that is allowing him to do now is have the confidence to roll that out further across the business. So I guess what we are not recommending is that you make a complete wholesale change on every role across the business. That might come with quite a lot of challenges if you was to do that. But if you can pick one area of your business or one particular role where you think you may be able to make that switch and really make that change and really go all in, as Jon did, really change that messaging you're giving to candidates, really bring those stakeholders on board, and do a process differently. Wait for you to identify the results that you see and potentially some of the challenges that you have along the way that will help inform how you can roll that out further across the business. Stakeholder engagement, we've talked about that quite a bit on this masterclass, but that's a stage again that you can't underestimate. As we've just seen in that poll, that's one element that a lot of you think will be a big barrier to introducing hiring for potential into your business. So making sure you get that engagement through workshops, through potentially having a partner such as Arctic Shores come in and deliver a session on the skills crisis and why hiring for potential is important, will just give you that business case and that way to convince your stakeholders that actually a change is needed to be able to do things differently. So again, don't underestimate that stage, because if you don't get their true buy-in, eventually it will trip you up in part of that process. Then again, just back to making sure the adverts and the job descriptions reflect what you're really looking for and measuring what matters. As Jon said, to be able to do that, he went through a process with Joel to complete that job analysis. Again, another opportunity there to get that stakeholder engagement, really bring in those hiring managers and ask them what's really important about the role. Yes, experience can be a benefit, but actually with what is it that makes someone truly successful in the role? Is it that they've done a task before, or is it a behaviour that they're bringing to that role? So again, a job analysis process can really help you achieve step 2 as well. And then ultimately the output of that is you have a defined list of those success criteria, those behaviours that are really critical for you to assess as part of a process for hiring for potential. Next slide, please, Megan. Then defining that process, make sure you know how and where you're going to actually assess those key success criteria. As Joel took you through in the Siemens process, there was some application questions that focused on sort of motivations and potential. There was a hiring for potential interview guide that focused on potential-based questions, and part of that process as well was the Arctic Shores behavioural-based assessment, which, as you know, is an assessment that will pick out those critical skills required for the role, and you'll be able to see how well your candidates match to that profile. When you're ready, you will go live, the exciting part, hopefully have an influx of candidates, and hopefully see different type of candidate applying for your role. No longer someone that's just stuck by applying because they have the right experience, but someone that can see they can bring their transferable skills to your role. We've talked about respecting the candidate, providing feedback. If you use a tool such as the Arctic Shores behavioural-based assessment, there's that automated feedback process, but there's also some other parts in a recruitment process where you might be able to provide feedback to that candidate. Even the unsuccessful candidates, actually we know that if they have a great experience, that's really beneficial to them individually to help their learning and development, but also for your business organisation. They may be a potential customer in the future, so you still want your brand to be respected by them. And then the final tip would be to have those measures of success. How are you, once you've changed to hiring for potential, how are you going to look back over that process and measure what were the success points for you? Thinking about, has it increased that diversity? Have you got that different profile of candidate and the quality of hire that you made? As Jon mentioned, have you now got a talent pool available for other roles because you attracted so many new great candidates into the process? I think that is the end of the slides. I think we have one final poll, which we can quickly show up. Thank you, Megan. Which is, which benefits of hiring for potential would you perceive as having the greatest impact on your business? So again, if you would, hopefully everyone's able to see that. If you could just submit your responses, that would be really helpful. And then we're going to go into the Q&A section. We do have 10 minutes left. So it would be really great if you've got any burning questions, if you could pop those in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll try and pull them out and read them out, and then myself, Joel and Jon can just jump in with those responses. So as that poll is going on, I'll just look, because I think we might have some questions come in. So we've got a question here. So, okay, going back to the interview guide. So Joel, you was talking about how those questions in the Siemens interview guide were very focused on potential and that move away from that competency-based example. So there's a question around, there's lots of examples for competency questions, not that many for assessing potential. So how could we design questions that are more potential based? Joel, did you want to talk through the experience of Siemens?
I think, this is probably an opportunity to mention ChatGPT as a great way of generating questions and content in a very quick space of time. So one of the ways to really increase efficiency around this is to get those success criteria and use them to generate questions. So you can actually, you still need an expert eye to make sure that it is measuring what you want it to measure and that it's targeting what you need. But just in terms of generating examples, that's probably the fastest way to do it. And I think I tried this with the Siemens interview guide, and it worked really well. I had to refine them and make sure that they were targeted in the right way and use the right sort of language. But that's a really good way of generating some example potential-based questions.
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, and I would just add to that potential-based hiring has been around for a while. This is not brand new. So in terms of designing interview questions, it is really just about making sure that candidates can really give you answers that talk about transferable skills, talk about how they would react and respond in certain situations, how they might feel, how they feel they might overcome challenges, and it's less about them just telling you about one time in the past when they have certainly done something. As Joel said, for Siemens, we were able to introduce those types of questions and design those. So again, if that's an area that you feel like you might need some more support in, that's certainly something that at Arctic Shores we could also help you to do as well. We've got some results of the poll, and that's quite interesting. That's fairly evenly split, but with 33% going on shortening time to hire, that would be the biggest benefit. And John, obviously you certainly did see that in Siemens, that really reduced time to hire. So that's good to know that would be a benefit that most people are interested in achieving also. Okay, let's look through some other questions. So we had a question around, is it too soon to comment on the performance of the hires? John, I think you touched on it earlier in terms of this, going from A to Z. But is there anything further you would add on that?
No, it's a great question, and it's back to my point around I can only evangelize about the attraction process at this point. We're too immature to understand the longer term impact, but that isn't dissimilar to any new hire. There's always going to be a risk. So we are literally D plus 14 days since the individuals joined the business, but early signs are really, really promising. They're of one of the behavioural questions required was that ability to adapt and that inquisitive nature that was critical to the role of a project engineer. All I can say is I'm seeing it in absolute spades already. So that bodes well. But realistically, until we've probably gone through that 6-month choppy water phase of any new hire, then I can probably give you a more rounded picture. But at this phase, prospects are looking good.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Okay, we've got a question. The challenge we will have is using potential hiring for technical blue collar roles. Changing mindsets will be really tricky. What support can you offer us, Arctic Shores, to help get the business on board? And there is a PS, and I'll read it out because it's a great one. We already use Arctic Shores for entry-level roles, and the results are fab. 88% of our highest scoring BBA candidates passed the interview process. That's brilliant. Great. So back to the question, and actually I think there was another question that was quite similar to this, but it's also changing that mindset is tricky. What support can we offer? The other question were what are your top 3 tips for convincing skeptics in the business that this is the way forward? So a combination. Jon, I wonder if you could just talk through perhaps what you think might be your top tips of convincing people in the business, and then we could talk about the Arctic Shores support.
Yeah, so it helps being the managing director to persuade people this is something to do. Now, that doesn't mean that we have a top-down organisation, far from it, but high-level sponsors and evangelising on the topic and the principles of why we're doing it clearly sets the right tone from the organisation. The second one is get Arctic Shores in a format that works to get to the masses, be it a call similar to this, be it just talking about the concepts of potential hire to everyone. So again, it's not just your voice in the organisation. And then finally is absolutely amplify the process and the benefits and identify those individuals that are coming through that process. Believe it or not, our 2 that have come through the Arctic Shores are calling themselves Dolly the Sheep. So they are expected to be pointed at around the office as it's them that have come through this wizardry. But seriously, let's talk. We're planning to diarise and vlog their experiences so that they can, people can see that, because what you need is more voices, and then this becomes normal. And once it becomes normal as a success and all those detractions disappear, then you can start to realize much bigger benefits.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jon. And I think that did touch on the offer that Arctic Shores can have to help you support that. We are able to come in, like Jon said, and do some sessions with stakeholders, do potentially some workshops with hiring managers. In the playbook, it talks about a CV-based workshop where you look at certain CVs and say, actually, would you hire these people? Would you not? I've heard of techniques where you take some CVs of people that are currently in the business as great performers, and then you say, would you hire these people? And then it's a no, and then you awkwardly point out that that's one of their colleagues sitting next to them, for example.
Jack,
so,
can I pick up on the technical blue collar role? Because in theory this is a technical blue collar role that I'm hiring for. So it is there is a requirement to be an effective project manager, to have some CAD skills, but also to be on site and installing alongside our partners with switchgear. So that was exactly, whoever asked that great question, that was exactly the intent. That historically this has probably been the types of role where that big CV of loads of qualifications and places where you've shoved your screwdriver in the past was really important. And as I say, our 2 candidates, one off from Talk, one is from Aldi, and both demonstrated to us the absolute inclination to be driven towards project management as an aspiration, and everything in their behavioural profile pointed in that direction. We've just got to give them the technical cherry on top to make them a success, and that for me is the easy part. Often mindset and behaviour is this difficult bit to bring in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jon. That's really helpful. I hope that's answered the question. I haven't seen any new questions pop in, and we are at time. So I just want to say thank you for everyone for making time to join the masterclass today. I hope it's been helpful and given you some advice and some ideas for how you might get started. If you've not yet read through the playbook, have a look through. It goes through all of those steps in quite a lot of detail, but also, we are here as Arctic Shores. Please do reach out to us if you are looking for further support at any of those stages, or you just want to talk this through in a bit more detail and see if it's the right time for you to move to hiring for potential for any of your roles. So please do reach out for us. thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Jon, for your time today.
Pleasure.
I'm sure everyone found your part the most interesting part of the masterclass.
No doubt. And listen, and connect with me on LinkedIn and DM me if you want a bit more detail on my own experiences. I'm more than happy to expand. You know, I know it's difficult to do in an hour, but more than happy to share that on there.
Thanks, Jon. That's great. Thank you, Joel, for your input.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining. Thank you, Megan, for driving the slides for us.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.